Ndake Amanirenas was the brave queen of the ancient African kingdom of Kush, located in modern-day Sudan. During her reign, she successfully led the Kushite army against the Romans in a war that lasted for 5 years. Today, she's considered one of the most famous queens of the kingdom of Kush and is referred to as the One-Eyed Queen, as she had lost an eye while in battle. Amanirenas was born within the periods of 60 and 50 BC. She was married to Emperor Tereketus, who later died in battle during the early periods of the 5-year war with the Romans. After the death of her husband, Amanirenas ascended the throne as ruler of the kingdom of Kush, is the second amongst the 4 Kandakes, queens of Kush. At the time of her reign, the Roman Empire was expanding rapidly as they conquered several territories in Egypt and Britain. As the Romans began pushing the borders in the south of Egypt into the kingdom of Kush, Amanirenas fought bravely to stop them. As queen, Amanirenas was a fierce and merciless warrior as she fought using several war elephants and was known to have 2 lions locked in her palace that she'd regularly feed her captives to. In 24 BC, during a campaign in Arabia, in the absence of the chief magistrate of Egypt, Cornelius Gallus, the new Roman provincial chief magistrate of Egypt, attempted to impose taxation on the kingdom of Kush. And Amanirenas wasn't having any of that, so she and her son Akinidad led the Kushite army into the Roman territories and launched an attack on the Romans, defeating them at Philae and Cyane, south of Egypt. After their victory, the Kushite army brought back a bronze depiction of the head of the Egyptian emperor Augustus Caesar, and Queen Amanirenas buried the head under the steps of the entrance of the royal palace. When the new governor of Egypt, Gaius Petronius, who always referred to Amanirenas as the One-Eye Candace, launched a counterattack on the Kushite army with about 10,000 Roman soldiers, pushing deep into their borders, driving the Kushites out of Cyane, reclaiming territories, and taking on many Kushites as slaves. Amanirenas did not yield, even after losing her son in battle. She repeatedly launched several counterattacks, including a failed attempt to attack the Roman garrison at Primis, present-day Qasr Ibrim. Still, the Kushite forces refused to concede defeat. Their resistance was beginning to be overwhelming for the Roman forces that later, in 24 BC, both Amanirenas and Augustus Caesar both agreed to a peace treaty that freed Kush from Rome. Amanirenas spent most of her life fighting to defend her kingdom from invaders. She died in 4226, giving Kush another 300 years of freedom from the Romans. Though the kingdom of Kush was abolished in 550 AD, in 1914, some archaeologists dug up the head of Augustus Caesar's statue, the one which had been buried in the entrance of the palace by Queen Amanirenas. To date, Amanirenas remains one of the most significant female African rulers. As if it wasn't for her bravery and strategic leadership, the kingdom of Kush would have been overcome by the Romans.
I like this little-known African history because it was actually one of the histories that we studied when I was in the military, and as we studied military tactics and of ancient cultures. It's one of those things that when you are in certain units in the Marine Corps or other branches that you will study. And one of the most intriguing things about her is, one, the fact that she was a woman during a time frame when other nation states or empires did not regard women as well as we do today, even though we still are lacking. But she, as a woman queen, a woman king, was able to defeat one of the most powerful armies in the world and bring to a standstill, a stalemate, one of the most powerful armies of the world. And her use of terrain is one of the primary things that we studied when we would look at this in military leadership training. She was able to use the high grounds and the mountains of Kush and Sudan in order to prevail against or stalemate one of the most heavily equipped militaries of the era, of the day, and give them defeats or cause them to not be able to advance. She kept the ability for the heritage of the Kushite people to still be known and alive, as well as it was very much learned from the people who would later come of the Axiom Empire, and Ethiopia to be able to ward off other European forces, i.e., the Italians, by utilizing some of those exact same tactics. Of course, militarily, I understand that. How does that apply in our lives? Well, one of the aspects of it applying in our life is taking the high ground when people have a tendency to want to war against you, to utilize greater finances, to utilize greater morality, to utilize greater thinking and cunning in order to maintain your level of independence from everybody else. And we do this through study. We studied this as a military tactic, but you can study today for any aspect of your life to learn tactics to be able to maintain your independence. Critical thinking is one of those things that you can apply from this, where if you critically think through a situation, gaining all the facts, gaining an understanding of those facts, and then putting them into practice, and then learning from whatever the results are. Just as she learned in every combat situation how to fight the Romans better and better, how the Ethiopians did the same thing towards the Italians, how the Aksumite Empire did the same thing against the Romans, is something that we can learn to defend ourselves against government, to defend ourselves against institutions, to defend ourselves against racism, by being able to cunningly make our way through it. You see, you're not going to defeat it by begging and pleading, which is what she wouldn't do. She would never beg and plead. She didn't even beg and plead when it came to a truce, but she put them in a position where it was in their best interest to have a peace treaty and not take advantage of them. So when we're dealing with systems like redlining, it is better for us to utilize our own interior financing in order to purchase the homes in our community, so that we can have more say as to the schools and the politicians that are involved in our community, by making sure that we're standing on equal ground. And that is what that's the war that the powers that be right now try to push on those who are disenfranchised, is to keep you in a state where you can't step towards them on equal footing. But when you can step towards them in equal footing, then they have nothing else but to capitulate for their best interest and formulate some type of peaceful coexistence. The same thing when it comes to religion. The more we study, the more we understand, the more we dig deeper into ancient cultures and connect all the dots, the less somebody has the ability to come in and change the nature of thinking, the nature of belief in facts that you may have concerning your religious practices. But those are some of the things that I've learned from understanding her mentality and her war tactics, and then instill them in my own life. So you guys have a great day. And remember, always, you got to free yourself to be yourself, because your greatness is non-negotiable. Good journey, good vibrations.